Single dad Janitor was mocked for being just a worker. Then he spoke, 6 languages that silenced the whole boardroom. "Careful with that mop." The young executive snickered the roomful of voices, pausing just long enough to hear him sharpen the blade. "You might smear the $1 million deal off the floor." A crisp ripple of laughter. The air conditioning purred overhead like a distant ocean. Somewhere, a wristwatch clicked steady and different. Michael Caine tightened his fingers on the cool metal handle. 5 grateful breaths, he told himself, the way a man tells his own heart how to live. In through the nose, 1, 2, he smelled lemon cleaner and stale conference coffee. Out through the mouth, 3, 4, he tasted the dry copper of swallowed pride. Pause 5. He moved the mop head in a quiet figure 8, the cloth whispering over the lacquered floor. Across the glass table chairs slid, shoes scuffed. The sound of a high heel tapped, measured, unhurried, then stopped. The room hushed without anyone being told to hush. "Let's get the AV check finished." A woman's voice, low, even clipped at the edges like a violin string tuned for control. Claire Donovan, CEO of Atlas Tech. Her perfume wasn't sweet, it was spare, clean, like cold air on a January morning. Michael didn't look up, but he felt the room align itself to her breath. The young executive who'd cracked the joke cleared his throat and vanished into quiet. "Someone silence the espresso machine," Claire said. "This room should sound like intention, not caffeine." A flurry near the door. The hiss of steam died. The conference room settled into a soft chorus, the vent's hush laptop keys murmuring a fingertip drumming an anxious rhythm on oak. Michael eased the mop into the yellow bucket. The handle bumped the rim with a small metallic note. Don't become the sound, he thought. Become the pause between sounds. He adjusted the half-rolled sleeve that always slid down his forearm, exposing the edge of a thin scar. He could feel the eyes on his back, then feel them look away. That was fine. Invisible was easier to clean. Who authorized maintenance during the executive run-through? Claire asked, not looking at him, not looking at anyone. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. Facilities had it on the calendar, someone said. It's already in progress. Then let already finish and vanish, she said. We have 30 minutes. Michael nodded to no one. The bucket wheels clicked once, twice. He rolled toward the door, the citrus smell trailing behind like a polite apology. "Hey," the same executive whispered as Michael passed. "FYI, that streak there." A fingernail scratched the table with a sound like a saw on bone. "You missed a spot." Michael's hands stilled. "Breathe," he told himself. He lifted the microfiber, wiped the circle once. The cloth made a soft shh. He set it down. "You're right," he said, voice even as the vent. "Wouldn't want anyone slipping." The young man smirked. The room didn't bother to laugh this time. Michael's cart rolled into the hallway. The door glided shut with a sigh that reminded him of hospital oxygen lines. He leaned the mop against the cart, rubbed his right knee until the ache eased. From his shirt pocket, the corner of a small battered notebook poked up edges softened by years. My dictionary of life. He touched it with his thumb the way some people thumb a rosary. Respect doesn't need translation. The old phrase pulsed through him. He hadn't said it out loud in a long time. He didn't intend to start today. "Excuse me." The door opened again. That same measured heel tap. Claire stepped halfway into the hall, not quite in his space, not quite out of hers. "Facilities." He straightened. "Yes, ma'am." Her gaze didn't move over him the way people inventory a body. It rested and weighed. He could hear the tiny intake of her breath, the faint paper scratch as she adjusted a note card in her hand. This carpet, she gestured once, holds sound. Don't let anyone drag chairs. Slide slowly. And whoever handles the wall clock, take the batteries out before we begin. "The clock?" he asked. "It ticks." She paused. The word ticked between them. "It sounds like failure counting." A quiet settled. He could hear beneath the ceiling hum the far-off clunk of an elevator cable switching lines. In that pause, he wondered what the world had sounded like to her in the years before the glass tower piano keys, perhaps, or late-night study lamps humming while a father's footsteps passed and didn't stop. "Understood," he said. "I'll handle it." She nodded. "Thank you." Then she added almost to herself, "Make sure the world stays spotless even when people don't." The door side closed. He stood still, the sentence slipping into him like warm tea into cold hands. Who keeps you spotless? He wondered. The thought felt disloyal, like a whisper in a church. He shook it away and pushed the cart toward the utility closet. Inside, the air smelled like rubber and solvents. A fan rattled with a low whir like a distant old truck idling. He found fresh gloves. The snap of latex made a clean, small sound. Down the hall, a printer coughed to life. Two voices argued in hushed practice tones about liability, then went silent the second a heel approached. Michael swiveled the cart and returned to the conference room. He climbed on a small step stool, fingers searching behind the big wall clock. The plastic clicked. The room exhaled relief. He slid the AA batteries into his pocket, and without the tick the silence fattened until it almost had weight. "Better," Claire said from the doorway. She hadn't announced herself. He'd felt her before he saw her, something about the way the air organized around her calm. "Thank you," she added. Then, almost imperceptibly, "I appreciate precision." He stepped down. "So does the floor," he said, and immediately regretted the line. Too clever. Too close to being seen. But she surprised him. A soft huff of a laugh, the kind that fogs a window but doesn't warm it. Duly noted. The young executive who'd made the joke earlier breezed by with a paper cup, the lid shrieking a little as it sealed. "All good, Claire. We'll knock this out of the park." He tipped the cup toward Michael. "Hey, custodian of the century. Careful not to polish us right out of our own reflections." Michael kept his face still. Breath. Breath. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. He turned to the cart. The intercom crackled. Everyone's head lifted in the same fraction of a second. The speaker's tone was bright, but it carried a tremor. "Attention, executive-level update from operations. International partners for the Atlas Tech Summit have arrived 20 minutes early. They are being escorted upstairs." A beat. The faint scrape of a chair stopping mid-slide, and a further note, the intercom continued, paper shuffling loud in the ceiling. "Our freelance interpreter is delayed on the Bay Bridge due to a multi-vehicle collision. Estimated time uncertain. Repeat, interpreter delayed." The line popped off with a small electric sting. Of all the sounds in the tower, that silence was the one that hurt. Michael felt the room tighten on the other side of the door like a drumhead tuned too high. He could hear the panic under the polished voices, the throat clears, the lip smacks, the dry swallow that sounds like paper folding. The young executive swore under his breath. Someone's phone buzzed against wood, a frantic bee trapped in a jar. Claire didn't move. When she finally spoke, her voice arrived calm, pitched for steadiness, not comfort. "We proceed," she said. Slowly. "We do not give an audience to chaos. Prep the welcome. Get legal on standby. Confirm the translation unit is updated." A murmur. "The unit glitched in QA yesterday, then get it here. Now." Michael stood in the hall with the clock batteries warm in his palm. The old phrase pulsed again, stubborn and quiet. "Respect doesn't need translation." He slid the batteries into his pocket beside the corner of the notebook. He thought of a small girl's laugh back in a quieter neighborhood, how it sounded against a kitchen's humming refrigerator when the world was simple for exactly 5 minutes. He thought of a voice he heard at night. "If words fail, you teach her to listen." He wasn't here to fix meetings. He was here to make rooms safe for feet. The elevator bell dinged at the far end of the corridor, bright metallic, too cheerful for the situation. The doors opened with a breath. Foreign speech spilled out syllables, clipped and careful, the polite music of people in expensive shoes who are ready to test your spine. Michael couldn't see them from where he stood, but he could hear suitcase wheels tick-ticking over the lobby seam, hear a hand slap a palm in greeting with the soft percussion of practiced diplomacy. The conference room door opened. Claire stepped out poised between the quiet she loved and the noise she couldn't avoid. Facilities, she said eyes on nobody, and briefly on him. Just a flick, just long enough for a heartbeat to wonder whether eyes can make sound. "Yes, ma'am," he answered, surprised by the steadiness in his own mouth. "Whatever happens in there," she said, voice just above the hallway hum, "I want the room to sound like we meant it." He nodded. "I can do sound." She turned toward the elevator voices, then stopped as if something in his reply tugged a memory he hadn't earned. "Good," she said, and walked away, heels ticking the measure that would either calm a storm or conduct it. Michael rolled the cart back an inch, just enough to feel the rubber wheel bump the wall, just enough to feel the building's ribs through plaster. The intercom clicked again, breathless now. "Final update," it said. "It reports the translation unit is unresponsive." The line died. The elevator voices grew nearer, warm greetings, expectant pauses. The conference room swallowed the first hello. The air seemed to hold its lungs tight. And in that hallway of glass and hush with clock batteries warming his palm and 5 breaths steadying his chest, Michael understood the shape of the silence he was about to walk past or into. Which would it be? The apartment was quiet except for the hum of the refrigerator and the faint rattle of the radiator pipes. It was the kind of morning where the world outside still held its breath waiting for the city to wake. Inside, Michael's voice broke the silence softly, deliberate calm, like someone teaching a prayer. "Merci," he said. "Say it again, sweetheart." "Merci," came the small, sleepy echo. Lila's voice always rose a little at the end of a word as if it were a question. He smiled. "Good. What does it mean?" "Thank you. And why do we say it?" She wrinkled her nose, thinking. "Because gratitude keeps the heart alive." He chuckled, and the sound was low-warm the way sunlight feels on closed eyelids. "That's right, even on tired mornings." A kettle hissed on the stove. The smell of instant coffee and toast drifted through the room. Their apartment was tiny, 1 bedroom, a table scarred with old rings from hot mugs, but it was steady, dependable. Every object seemed to hum with use, the kind of life built quietly 1 bill and 1 kindness at a time. Lila leaned over her cereal bowl spoon, clinking softly. "Dad, how many words do you know now?" Michael looked toward the shelf above the counter. The old leather notebook rested there, edges worn soft spine cracked from years of fingers. "My dictionary of life." He reached for it. The cover creaked. The pages smelled faintly of dust and something older airport air, maybe. He flipped to a random page. 6 languages stared back at him in his own handwriting: hope, espoir, Hoffnung, speranza, Kibo, esperanza. He let his finger rest there. "Enough words to fill a quiet house," he said. "Mom helped you write?" The spoon paused in her hand. She didn't ask often, and when she did, her voice carried the caution of a child who knows certain doors open to ghosts. "Yes," he said softly. She helped. What was her favorite word? Michael turned a few pages, the whisper of paper louder in the stillness. There it was, Elena's handwriting, looping and graceful. Beneath it, a note in his smaller script. "Listen, écoutez, hören, ascoltare, kiku, escuchar." He read it aloud. "Listen." Lila tilted her head. "That's not fancy. It doesn't need to be." He smiled, though his chest tightened. "Your mom used to say the world only makes sense to people who listen before they speak." The radiator gave a soft knock like an old friend agreeing. He poured her another splash of milk and checked the clock. "Eat up, kiddo. You've got school, and I've got to." He stopped himself before saying, "Scrub." She never liked that word. "Go earn the rent." Lila pushed the bowl away. "Can we play the word game first?" He hesitated. He was already running late, but the look in her eyes, half hope, half plea, was the same as Elena's on nights when she wanted one more dance in the kitchen before bed. "All right," he said. "You start." She thought for a second. "Word is, promise." He nodded, feeling something shift deep inside him. "Promise," he repeated, "to keep something safe." "What's the French one?" "Promesse. Japanese." He smiled faintly. "Yakusoku. Spanish, promesa." She grinned. "How many promises do you have, Dad?" The question was light, but it landed heavy. He looked toward the window where the city buses hissed outside their brakes, sighing like tired lungs. Too many, he thought. And one. I'll never finish keeping. He brushed her hair aside. "Just one that still matters," he said. "And I'm doing my best." After breakfast, while Lila put on her shoes, Michael packed her lunch and slipped the little notebook back onto the shelf. A page fluttered open on its own. At the bottom, written in faded ink, was a note from Elena he hadn't seen in months. "If one day words fail, you teach her to listen instead." He traced the line with his thumb. "I'm trying," he thought. "I really am." When Lila left with the neighbor, he stood in the doorway a moment longer than usual. The hall smelled faintly of detergent and the neighbor's cinnamon candles. He heard laughter from somewhere upstairs, bright, careless laughter, and it made him ache with something like envy. The elevator groaned, descending with that same tired whine as always. He thought of yesterday's chaos at work, the way the room had sounded like panic in 3 different languages. He hadn't planned to speak. He hadn't planned to feel anything either. But when the voices started to clash, the air had tasted wrong. Sharp, metallic, the taste of pride about to collapse. He remembered the CEO's voice, cold, precise. Claire Donovan. Make sure the world stays spotless even when people don't. The way she'd said it, it wasn't cruelty. It was exhaustion disguised as control. He recognized it because he'd worn it once. He filled his thermos, closed the lid tight. The snap of the metal echoed in the small kitchen. Then he reached for his work ID, the plastic clicking against his keys. As he left, his eyes caught the piano music drifting from the neighbor's apartment, hesitant notes, half-learned scales. He stopped listening. The rhythm stumbled, recovered, stumbled again. Someone's trying, he thought. The sound followed him down the hall like a heartbeat trying to find its timing. The bus ride downtown was crowded. Conversations overlapped like restless birds. Michael sat by the window, the seat vibrating under the weight of the city's pulse. He closed his eyes. The smell of cheap perfume and cold metal mixed in the air. A man coughed 3 rows back. A woman whispered something into her phone in Spanish. Amor no es decirlo. Es hacerlo. Love isn't saying it, it's doing it. He almost smiled. Maybe words really did follow him wherever he went. When he arrived at Atlas Tech, the lobby was already alive with sounds of morning power shoes, clicking phones ringing the elevator chime, slicing through conversation. He flashed his badge, the scanner beeping a small robotic permission granted. He'd just finished cleaning the front panels of the conference room when he saw Claire again. She was alone this time, speaking softly into a headset. Her tone wasn't icy now, it was low, almost weary. "Yes, I know the deal hinges on interpretation," she said. "No, I'm not worried. I said I'm not worried." A sigh slipped through her teeth. Because worry sounds like weakness and weakness echoes. She ended the call, then turned startled to find him standing there. "I can come back," he said. She shook her head. "No, it's fine. You're early." Her voice dropped half a key like she was speaking through the memory of a headache. Michael hesitated, then said quietly, "I heard about the meeting. Must have been a long night." Her eyes flicked to him, quick assessing. "You heard walls have ears," he said with a small smile. "And vents carry everything. Then maybe I should start talking to ceilings instead of people." He chuckled softly. Ceilings don't answer back. Something so faint he could have imagined it shifted in her expression. Not warmth exactly. More like recognition. 2 people who'd both forgotten what it was like to be spoken to gently. As he turned to leave, her voice stopped him. "What's your name again, Michael Caine?" She nodded slowly as if committing it to memory. "Thank you, Mr. Caine, for keeping the world spotless." The door closed behind her. The echo lingered in the hallway like an aftertaste, sharp, soft, and strange. Michael pressed his palm against his chest and counted the familiar rhythm, 5 grateful breaths. Then, quietly, he whispered to himself the phrase that had once kept him steady through war zones and peace talks alike. Respect doesn't need translation. He didn't know it yet, but those same words were already carving a path back toward her. The elevator doors closed with a sigh that sounded too human. Inside, Claire Donovan pressed the button for the 30th floor and exhaled through her nose the way she'd learned to do in meditation classes she never finished. The faint hum of machinery filled the silence. It was the only sound she liked inside her glass tower, mechanical, predictable, emotionless. Noise is chaos, she often reminded herself, and chaos was the one thing she couldn't afford, not in her company, not in her heart. When the elevator stopped between floors, she tapped her phone screen impatiently. No signal. She sighed, ready to call maintenance, when a quiet male voice drifted from the corner. "Looks like the tower wants us to slow down a minute." She turned sharply. A man stood near the panel sleeves, rolled, holding a mop handle like a walking stick. His uniform was clean, but his hands told another story, scarred, worn, precise. "You," she said. "Maintenance, yes, ma'am." Elevator froze mid-route. Happens when people press the door close button too fast. She raised a brow. "Are you implying that was me?" He smiled faintly. Statistically speaking, executives don't wait well. A silence hung between them, awkward but oddly balanced. Somewhere above the cables groaned a low metallic moan. The sound vibrated through the air through her shoes. Claire crossed her arms. "Do you know how to fix it? I can try," he said. "But we might have to wait for the system to reset." She looked at her watch. "I don't have time to wait. I have a board briefing in 10 minutes. He leaned against the wall, calm. "Then it's a good time to breathe. 10 minutes can teach more than 10 hours when you stop fighting the clock." She turned her head, studying him. "You talk like a therapist, not a janitor." Therapists get paid more to say the same thing, he said softly. Her lips twitched despite herself. He's bold, she thought. Too bold for a man who scrubs floors. The elevator remained still. She tapped her fingers on the railing. "I hate this sound," she muttered. "What sounds silence?" she said. "It's too loud." He nodded slowly as if he understood something she hadn't said aloud. Most people turn up the noise to drown what they're afraid to hear. "And what about you?" she asked. He smiled a quiet, tired smile. "I clean what's left when the noise stops." Her phone buzzed suddenly, 1 bar of service. She raised it to the ceiling, hoping for more. "Unbelievable," she hissed. Michael's tone stayed steady. "Technology doesn't like panic. It listens to heartbeat rhythms. Yours is racing." Her eyes narrowed. "Do you always psychoanalyze the people who sign your paycheck?" "Only when they look like they need someone to tell them to exhale." The elevator jerked once, then stopped again. She grabbed the rail. He steadied her instinctively, his hand warm against her wrist. For a heartbeat, neither moved. The hum of the motor filled the silence again, slower now, like a calm breath returning. "Thank you," she said quietly, stepping back. "I'm fine." "I didn't say you weren't." She stared at the closed doors, trying to ignore how the air seemed different now, less sterile, almost human. "You're too calm for someone trapped in a box 30 floors up." He chuckled. Spent years in smaller rooms with bigger problems. The phrasing caught her. What kind of rooms? Ones where people spoke 10 languages but never really listened. His voice had that echo of loss that made her chest tighten before she could stop it. "You make it sound poetic," she said. "Pain usually starts that way." The elevator dinged faint mechanical mercy. The doors opened slowly onto a hallway of glass and light. "Looks like you got your wish," he said. She stepped out but turned back. "You never told me your name." "Michael." She nodded once. "Thank you, Michael." For fixing the elevator, her gaze held his. For not making it worse. He smiled as the doors slid shut. That night, Claire stayed late in her office. The city pulsed below horns, sirens the soft whir of air vents whispering through the glass walls. The building was her cathedral of noise, yet inside she felt nothing but the echo of that man's calm voice. She pulled open a drawer and took out an old photograph her father smiling in front of an unfinished skyscraper. His hand rested on her shoulder, and she could almost hear his voice. "Noise is success, Claire. Silence is failure." But tonight the words didn't comfort her. They clanged inside like loose bolts. Her assistant's voice crackled through the intercom. "Ms. Donovan, are you still in the office?" "Yes, there's someone from maintenance still on this floor. Do you want me to send him home?" She hesitated. "No, I'll tell him myself." When she stepped into the hallway, she heard the rhythmic swish of a mop. Michael was there, earbuds dangling, but no music playing. He looked up when she approached. "Still fixing the world?" she asked. "Trying," he said. "It gets messy again, faster than you'd think." "Why stay this late?" He shrugged. The building breathes differently at night, easier to listen, to what he thought a moment, to what people leave behind when they stop pretending. She folded her arms, studying him. "You're full of phrases, Michael. Where did you learn to talk like that?" He hesitated as if weighing how much to say. Somewhere far from here. Somewhere people used words to keep peace. The way he said it, soft, careful, made her heartbeat hitch. She wanted to ask more, but something in his eyes said, "Don't." Instead, she said quietly, "You know you were right earlier. Executives don't wait well." He smiled. "It's hard to wait when you think time owes you something." That line pierced her sharper than he could have guessed. "Time owes me my father," she thought. "My music. My life." "You sound like someone who's lost things," she said. He met her eyes. "Everyone who cleans for a living has." The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was full of things unsaid, of ghosts politely stepping back to let them breathe. "Good night, Michael," she said finally. "Good night, Ms. Donovan." As she walked away, he called after her, his tone softer, almost reverent. "For what it's worth. Silence doesn't mean failure." She stopped. The words landed deeper than he'd know. "Then, what does it mean?" "It means you finally stopped lying to yourself." The hum of the lights filled the pause. She turned, but he was already pushing his cart down the hall, the wheels squeaking rhythmically, a slow, unhurried beat that followed her into the elevator. Inside, as the doors closed, Claire exhaled for the first time all day. The sound startled her, a real breath full and human. Somewhere between the 30th floor and the ground, she realized something she hadn't allowed herself to in years. She wasn't angry at the noise. She was afraid of what the silence might say back. And when the elevator dinged open, the world outside sounded different, softer somehow. But far below, in the dark maintenance room, Michael looked at the reflection of the tower lights in a bucket of water and whispered the line that kept him steady. "Respect doesn't need translation." The water rippled. The tower hummed. Two people alone in the same building began to hear each other in the quiet. The morning began with tension in the air so thick it could have been sliced and served. The top floor of Atlas Tech shimmered with nerves. Phones rang, shoes clicked, printers coughed out contracts like warning shots. Every sound felt too sharp, too urgent, too loud. Claire Donovan stood by the glass wall of the conference room watching 3 black cars glide to a stop outside the building. "They're early," she murmured. Her assistant Emily nodded, breath shallow. 15 minutes early, ma'am. The Japanese delegation's already in the lobby." Claire's jaw tightened. "Get the French and German teams ready. I want the translation unit tested again." Emily hesitated. It said it was still inconsistent. Inconsistent. Claire's voice turned cold enough to frost the windows. "We're about to sign a $200 million contract. I don't care if they have to duct tape a new chip in. Make it work." She turned to the long table, 15 leather chairs, 12 screens, and one invisible crack running through the atmosphere. The hum of the air conditioning couldn't disguise it. By the door, Michael pushed his cart slowly, the rubber wheels whispering against the carpet. He'd planned to finish before the meeting started, but everything had accelerated. That was how panic worked. It made the world move too fast for reason to keep up. Mr. Kane Emily said quietly, "Please finish quickly. The executives are." He raised a hand gently. "I know. I'll be quiet as breath." He meant it. But even silence can have sound, the soft swish of the mop, the faint rhythm of his breathing. He felt the vibration in the floor, the weight of expectation pressing down like a thundercloud about to split. Moments later, the elevator doors opened. The foreign delegations arrived together, a swirl of languages, cologne, and expensive leather. Japanese murmurs blended with French consonants, clipped German syllables collided with English greetings. The air filled with formal smiles that didn't reach anyone's eyes. Claire stepped forward, every gesture exact. "Welcome to Atlas Tech," she said. "Let's make history together." The Japanese chairman bowed slightly. The German representative adjusted his cufflinks. The French executive, tall and restless, murmured something to his translator, but the device at his ear sputtered and produced nonsense. "Quoi?" he snapped. "What did it say?" The translator looked panicked. It said, "Lower cost, lower quality." "That's not what you meant." Miss Donovan Claire's heartbeat froze. "No, absolutely not. That's a machine error. It's supposed to say, lower cost, maintain quality." But it was too late. The word quality had already fractured the room. The Japanese delegate's brows drew together. "You mean you lower quality for cost reduction?" Claire shook her head. "No, that's not the German cut-in. We agreed on maintaining precision standards. If quality drops, Germany cannot." Voices rose. One interpreter stammered, another fumbled with the device, the AI translation system blinking red. Claire's pulse pounded in her ears. "Where's Ite?" she barked. On the way, Emily whispered. She looked toward the back of the room, toward Michael, who was now frozen in place, mop in hand, eyes lowered, but listening. He could feel the chaos in the room, the sharp scrape of chairs, the rising pitch of voices overlapping like crashing cymbals. The French delegate slammed his palm on the table. "If this is how Atlas Tech communicates, perhaps we've made a mistake." "Wait," Claire started, but her voice was swallowed by the storm. Then, through the noise, came another voice. Low, steady, and in perfect Japanese, "Sumimasen. Choto yoroshi desu ka?" "Excuse me, may I help clarify something?" The sound sliced through the air. Every conversation died mid-sentence. Heads turned. The janitor stood there, one hand still on the mop handle, the other raised slightly, not in defiance, but in calm respect. Claire stared. Mr. Kane Michael stepped forward slowly. "I believe there's been a small miscommunication," he said this time in flawless English. "May I translate?" The Japanese chairman blinked. "You speak Japanese?" Michael nodded, switching tongues again. "Hi, Sukoshi dake." Enough to make sure everyone's heard correctly. His accent was crisp, natural, unforced. He gestured gently toward the French representative. She said, "Maintain quality, not reduce it." Then in French, elle voulait dire maintenir la qualité, pas la réduire. The Frenchman froze, his frown softening. "C'est exact." "Yes," Michael replied in English. "That's exact." A stunned silence. Even the projector hum seemed to pause. Claire found her voice. "You can," she whispered. "You can translate." He turned to her with a quiet smile. "Words are just tools, ma'am. I used to fix them before I fixed floors." The German delegate spoke next, cautious. "Dan?" "Können Sie Deutsch auch?" Michael answered in gentle, fluent German. "Genug, Respekt zu zeigen." Enough to show respect. It wasn't just the words, it was the tone. Calm, grounded. Every phrase carried the weight of a man who'd learned silence before sound. For the next few minutes, Michael guided the room back to order. His voice flowed between languages like water, never hurried, never proud. The chaos softened, the tension drained, and something rare filled the room trust. When the final misunderstanding cleared, the Japanese chairman leaned forward, nodding slightly. "Your interpreter, he's remarkable." Claire hesitated. "He's not an interpreter." Michael interrupted gently. "Maintenance." The room went still again. The French executive exhaled, almost smiling. "Then, monsieur, you've just reminded us why machines should never replace people." Laughter, soft, nervous, but real, spread through the room. Michael bowed lightly. "Words connect us, but respect keeps the bridge from collapsing." Claire watched him, completely still. She'd spent years mastering control, commanding respect through power. But this man, this quiet custodian, had done it in 10 minutes without a title, without a nameplate, without fear. When the meeting ended, the delegates shook hands warmly, promising revised drafts and future calls. Cameras flashed. Applause echoed. And in the corner, Michael quietly rolled his mop bucket away. As the last foreign guest left, Claire called out Mr. Kane. He stopped at the doorway. She stepped closer, voice lowered. "How many languages do you speak?" He shrugged. 6 that people pay attention to. A few more that nobody hears anymore. Such as, he smiled faintly, kindness, humility, gratitude. They're harder to pronounce. She exhaled softly as if the air itself had grown lighter. "You just saved the biggest deal of my career." He met her eyes. "I didn't save a deal, Ms. Donovan. I saved a conversation." The words landed between them, quiet, powerful, impossible to forget. As he turned to leave, she said almost to herself, "Who are you really?" He looked back, just a man who still believes words can clean more than floors. The door shut behind him with the soft sigh of hydraulic hinges. Claire stood there staring at the empty doorway. For the first time in years, her silence wasn't armor. It was awe. Outside, the hum of the city returned horns wind distant traffic. But inside her head, all she could hear was his voice. Respect doesn't need translation. And though she didn't understand why, her heart repeated it in perfect rhythm. The night after the meeting, Atlas Tech's glass tower looked different. It shimmered with the faint echo of applause that still lingered in its walls. But for Claire Donovan, there was no triumph. Only a strange, quiet tremor running under her skin, a restlessness that no amount of success could soothe. She sat alone in her office shoes, off hair loosened, staring at the city lights stretching like nervous veins across the dark. On the desk lay the signed agreement, $200 million worth of validation, but her eyes weren't on it. They were fixed on a maintenance badge she'd picked up after the meeting. Michael Kane, Facilities Level B3. The name carried weight she didn't understand. His voice, too, its calm resonance still played in her mind like a melody she couldn't stop replaying. She thought of the way he'd said it, steady and unflinching. "I didn't save a deal, Ms. Donovan. I saved a conversation." Something about that had undone her. She'd built her career on winning conversations, but never on saving them. She pressed her fingertips to her temples. Why can't I stop thinking about this man? The city clock outside struck 11 each chime, echoing like a question she didn't want to answer. Down on the maintenance floor, Michael washed the last bucket. The hum of the water pipes sounded like a gentle heartbeat. He rolled his sleeves higher, exposing the old scar along his wrist. The building was empty now, its corporate pulse asleep, and he preferred it that way. He dried his hands on a rag, then took out his small leather notebook, My Dictionary of Life. Flipping through the pages, he found one word circled twice. Forgive, pardonner, vergeben, yurusu, perdonar. He whispered it aloud. Forgive. The word left a taste of iron and peace all at once. For a moment he could almost hear Elena's voice again, warm, musical. Promise me, Michael, she'd said years ago, her hand weak but steady. Promise you'll teach Lila to listen, even when the world doesn't. The memory came like a wave. Her laughter, the smell of rain on their balcony in Geneva, the distant sound of a violin from a street corner below. Then the crash, the hospital monitors, the silence that had never really left him. He closed the notebook. 5 grateful breaths, he murmured. For what's left. Claire hadn't meant to return to the building that night, but something about the quiet called her back. She stepped out of the elevator onto the maintenance floor, heels echoing against the concrete. The air smelled faintly of soap and metal. She spotted him near the supply room, rolling a mop back into place. "Still working?" she asked. He looked up surprised, but not startled. "Couldn't sleep," he said. "Some people count sheep. I count fingerprints on glass." She smiled faintly. "I should hire you for my insomnia." "You already did," he said, and she almost laughed. Claire walked closer. The hum of the fluorescent light buzzed overhead, soft and low. "I looked up your file," she said, keeping her tone neutral. "You used to work at the United Nations." He didn't answer immediately. That was another life. You speak 6 languages and you mop floors for a living. That doesn't sound like another life, it sounds like an unfinished sentence. Michael leaned on the handle of his mop. Sometimes the best sentences end in silence. She folded her arms. "That's poetic?" "Not really. It's just what happens when words cost too much." His answer hit her deeper than she expected. She moved closer. "What happened, Michael? Why did you leave that life behind?" He hesitated. The old wound inside him stirred. "Let's just say I forgot how to listen. And people got hurt because of it." Claire studied him, hearing the faint tremor in his voice. "You're not the only one who's hurt people by forgetting how to listen." For a long moment, neither spoke. The air between them carried only the steady buzz of the overhead light and the rhythmic ticking of the janitor's old wristwatch. Finally, he said, "You know, silence isn't always punishment. Sometimes it's mercy." She frowned. "Mercy noise hides what we can't face. But silence—" He paused, meeting her eyes. "Silence makes you see yourself." The words slipped under her guard like warm rain into cracked earth. No one had ever spoken to her like that, not board members, not friends, not even her late father. She turned away, pretending to inspect a nearby storage cabinet. "I used to play piano," she said suddenly. "Before all this. Why'd you stop?" "My father said music was a luxury. That sound didn't build companies." Michael nodded slowly. He was wrong. Sound builds everything. It's the first thing we ever hear even before we're born. Claire felt something tighten in her throat. "You talk like someone who still hears music." "Only echoes now," he said softly. "But sometimes echoes are enough." They both stood still for a while, letting the quiet stretch and settle. Outside, wind pressed against the glass, making the building groan faintly. "Do you ever miss it?" she asked. "What?" "Whatever you left behind." He smiled without looking at her. "Every day. But missing something doesn't mean you belong there anymore." Claire exhaled, slow and heavy. "That's exactly how I feel," she thought. When she finally spoke again, her voice had softened. "You reminded me of something today, Michael." "What's that?" "That leadership isn't about control. It's about presence." She hesitated, then added, "And maybe about respect." He glanced at her eyes, warm but unreadable. "Respect doesn't need translation," he said quietly. The phrase landed in her chest like a steady drumbeat. It was simple, profound, true. She smiled faintly. "You say that often, only when people forget to mean it." Claire tucked her hair behind her ear. "Then maybe you should start teaching it." He laughed, the sound low and real. "I doubt the board would pay for lessons from a janitor. Maybe they'd pay for peace," she said. He met her gaze, and for the first time she didn't look like a CEO and he didn't look like a janitor. They were just 2 tired souls sharing the same air, the same longing to be understood. A phone buzzed from her purse, breaking the spell. She looked down. It was a news alert: Atlas Tech closes record-breaking deal. She silenced it quickly. The success no longer felt like victory. It felt hollow. "Good night, Michael," she said quietly. "Good night, Claire." Her name on his lips startled her not by its sound but by its sincerity. No one had said it like that in years. As she stepped into the elevator, she caught her reflection in the mirrored wall. For once, it didn't look perfect. It looked real. Down below, Michael cleaned the last streak of light off the floor. The mop made a sound like a sigh. He whispered the words to himself, words that had carried him across oceans and losses alike. Forgive. Listen. Begin again. He didn't know that upstairs Claire whispered almost the same thing, and somewhere between their breaths the tower finally felt human. The invitation came the next morning, handwritten on company stationery. Dinner, 7 p.m. Amelia's on 5th. CD. Michael stared at the note, unsure if it was an invitation or a command. Either way, it didn't feel optional. That evening, he arrived early. The restaurant smelled of roasted garlic and polished oak. A violin played softly somewhere near the back. He felt out of place in his neatly ironed shirt and the jacket he'd kept since Elena's memorial. He sat by the window hands, folded the silverware glinting under amber light. Claire entered exactly on time. The click of her heels was steady, confident, but there was something different tonight, a looseness in her step as if she'd left her armor in the car. She wore black, simple, but elegant. Michael she greeted, sliding into the seat opposite him. "I wasn't sure you'd come." He smiled faintly. I wasn't sure either. Why, he looked down at the wine glass in front of him. Because usually when CEOs invite janitors to dinner, it's either to fire them or fix something. Her laugh came quietly, like something surprised out of her. Maybe tonight it's neither. They ordered her Italian his plain coffee and pasta. Between the clink of plates and the distant hum of conversation, a fragile silence settled. It wasn't awkward, it was searching. She was the one to break it. "You know, I've been trying to figure you out. Most people give up after the mop," he said. Claire tilted her head. "That's exactly it. You're not like anyone I've met here. Everyone in that building tries to sound important. You try to sound true." He gave a quiet chuckle. "Truth doesn't get you promotions." "Maybe not, but it gets remembered." For a moment, he didn't answer. He just listened, the scrape of cutlery, the laughter from a nearby table, the violin blending into the heartbeat of the room. Then he said softly, "People only remember truth when they've forgotten how to lie." Her fork froze midway. "You really are impossible to read." "Maybe that's because I stopped trying to write a new story." Claire leaned in slightly. "And yet, here you are, still speaking in metaphors." He looked at her eyes, calm but steady. "You of all people should understand metaphors. You build glass towers for a living." She blinked. "What's that supposed to mean?" "It means you like transparency," he said, "but only the kind you can control." The air shifted. The waiter arrived with their meals, breaking the tension. The smell of basil and truffle butter filled the space. Claire set her napkin down slowly. "You're very observant." He smiled faintly. "It's part of the job." "What cleaning?" "Listening." That single word landed heavier than the wine between them. She looked away, eyes glistening just slightly. "I used to be good at that," she said quietly. Listening, before the noise took over. Michael didn't push, he just waited. Finally, she sighed. "My father was a man of sound. He used to say, 'Noise is proof of life.' He died of a heart attack during a stockholder call. His last words were, 'Keep the numbers talking.' So I did. For years I made sure the noise never stopped." He studied her face, the strength, the exhaustion woven together. And when the noise finally stopped, she gave a small, broken laugh. "I didn't know who I was anymore." Michael nodded slowly. "That's the problem with noise. It fills every room, but empties you out." A pause. Then she asked softly, "And what about you? Who were you before this?" He stared into his coffee, the steam rising like ghosts. Someone who thought words could save the world. Did they? They almost did, he whispered, until they killed someone I loved? Claire's breath caught. Your wife? He nodded. Elena. We worked together. Interpreters at the UN. I said something wrong in a press brief, just one wrong phrase. It caused confusion between two governments. A flight was delayed, security rerouted, and her car was on that route. Silence filled the table, softer than grief, heavier than guilt. I left that world the next day, he said quietly, because I realized language isn't just power, it's responsibility, and I wasn't ready to hold it anymore. Claire's eyes softened, her voice barely above a whisper. You were trying to do something good. So was I when I tried to clean her memory spotless, he said, but guilt doesn't wash off. It just dries slower. The violinist shifted to a new song, something tender, haunting. Claire's throat tightened. You know, she said, for someone who hides from words, you use them beautifully. He looked up, meeting her gaze. That's the thing about silence, it teaches you what words are worth keeping. They didn't speak for a while after that. The city moved outside, cars sighing along the wet streets, conversations weaving through the glass. When the waiter cleared the plates, Claire asked if you could go back, would you change it? Every day, he said. But life doesn't rewind. It translates. Translates. He smiled. Yes, pain into purpose, regret into empathy, loss into language you can finally live with. Claire leaned back, eyes shining in the dim light. You make it sound almost holy. It's not, he said. It's just human. The check arrived. She reached for it. He stopped her hand gently. Let me. Her brows lifted. You earn half of what my wine cost. He grinned. Then you'll let me pay in gratitude. It's a universal currency. She laughed, soft and genuine, and something inside her chest loosened. As they stood to leave, Claire said quietly, You know, you reminded me of something tonight. What's that? That there's a difference between speaking to be heard and speaking to connect. He nodded. Connection doesn't need perfect grammar. Outside, the air smelled of rain. The city lights blurred in puddles. They stood for a moment under the awning, the sound of water filling the spaces where words might have been. Claire turned to him, her voice low. You're not like anyone I know, Michael. He smiled, pulling his jacket close. Maybe that's the point. She wanted to ask him something. Why me? Why tonight? But instead she said, Thank you for dinner. He shook his head gently. You're welcome for listening. As she got into her car, the wipers sweeping rhythmically, she looked back once. He was still standing there under the rain, watching the streetlights shimmer on the wet pavement. And for the first time in years, Claire Donovan realized she didn't hear the city's noise. She heard music. The next morning began with rain that never decided if it wanted to fall or hover. The city breathed in mist, and inside Atlas Tech the usual buzz was muted. The storm had slowed everyone except for whispers. Those always moved fast. Claire walked into her office to find Emily waiting by her desk, pale and hesitant. There's something you should see, she said, placing a folded sheet of paper beside the morning reports. Claire unfolded it. The first line made her blood run cold. The CEO has been spending after-hours time with maintenance staff. Some employees are questioning her judgment and professionalism. Unsigned, typed, anonymous. Her eyes scanned the words again, slower this time. The tone was polite, but soaked in venom. Who sent this? She asked quietly. Emily shook her head. It came through interoffice mail. No name. Who else has seen it? No one, as far as I know. Good. Claire folded the letter carefully, the paper crackling like brittle leaves. Forget it ever existed. Emily hesitated. Ma'am, rumors travel faster than truth. Claire gave a tight smile. Then let them run. I'll walk. When Emily left, the office felt colder. Claire stared at the rain on the glass, tiny rivers running down her reflection, blurring her face. She could hear her father's voice again, calm and cutting. Perception, Claire. That's what power is made of. Lose it, and you lose control. Her hand trembled slightly as she set the letter aside. Control. Always control. Down in the sublevel, Michael had no idea what was unraveling above him. He was cleaning the east hallway when Claire appeared. Her footsteps quick-sharp the rhythm of someone trying not to think. He looked up instantly, reading the tension in her face. "Rough morning." "Something like that," she said, brushing a strand of hair from her eyes. "You look like someone fighting a storm without a coat." She almost smiled. "Maybe I forgot how to wear one." He leaned on the mop-handle voice, soft. "Then maybe it's time to stop fighting the rain." Her breath hitched slightly. She wanted to tell him about the letter about the whispers, but the words felt too raw, too dangerous. Instead, she asked Michael, "How do you deal with people who think they know you when they don't?" He paused, thinking. "I don't try to convince them otherwise. Time translates better than words." "Sometimes I wish time moved faster," she murmured. He gave a quiet chuckle. "If it did, we'd never learn patience, and that's the only language worth mastering." She met his gaze. For a moment, she wasn't the CEO and he wasn't the janitor. Just two people standing in the hum of fluorescent light speaking truths too fragile for the rest of the world. Before she could say more, her phone vibrated. She checked the screen, then swore under her breath. "Board wants a meeting. Now." "About," she hesitated. "Perception." He frowned. "That's a dangerous word." She nodded. "It always is." 2 hours later, the boardroom smelled faintly of tension and cologne. The long mahogany table gleamed under the recessed lights, and a row of watchful eyes waited as Claire entered. "Miss Donovan," began Richard Hale, the oldest board member voice heavy with measured disapproval. "We've received concerns about professional boundaries being crossed within the company." She kept her face neutral. "Concerns." Specifically, he continued that a member of the maintenance staff has been given access to executive spaces during and after business hours. Claire clasped her hands. "Mr. Hale, if this is about the translation incident, I can assure you it's not about the incident he cut in. It's about optics. Our investors don't want distractions. You've worked hard to rebuild this company's image. Don't let sentiment blur your judgment." The word sentiment hit her like a slap. Another board member younger chimed in carefully. "You've been an exemplary leader, Claire, but rumors can be corrosive. The smart thing is to maintain distance." "Distance," she repeated softly. "That's what we call dignity now. Dignity, Hale said, is knowing when not to get your hands dirty." She leaned forward. Her voice, though calm, cut through the room like a blade wrapped in velvet. "If respect depends on how clean your hands look, then maybe this company forgot what built it." A murmur spread. Hale's lips pressed thin. "We're only advising caution." "No," she said, standing. "You're advising fear. There's a difference." The room fell silent. Every clock ticked louder for a moment. Then, with a measured breath, she added, "You'll get your reports on time. But I won't fire a man for reminding this company what humanity sounds like." She left before they could reply, the door closing behind her with a soft, final click. Michael found her later on the rooftop terrace where the rain had stopped, but the air still smelled like thunder. She was leaning on the railing, staring at the skyline as if searching for something that didn't exist. "You skipped lunch," he said gently. "Not hungry, or too proud to be seen eating with a janitor." She turned, startled. "How did you—" He smiled faintly. Rumors echo faster than footsteps. Her eyes softened. "You heard. Doesn't take much listening in this building. Glass walls, thin hearts." "I could fix it," she said bitterly. "All I'd have to do is pretend you don't exist. Would that make you sleep better?" She looked away. "It would make them sleep better." He nodded slowly. "Then maybe you should ask yourself which bed you want to lie in, truth or comfort." She closed her eyes, the wind tugging at her hair. "You make it sound simple." "It's not," he said. "But the right things rarely are." For a while, the only sound was the hum of the city below the whisper of cars, the distant horns, the low rhythm of life continuing despite everything. Finally, Claire turned toward him, her voice barely above the wind. Why do you care, Michael? Why risk being dragged into my mess? He smiled a tired, gentle smile. Because I've seen what silence costs when you don't speak up. Something in her broke, then something small, invisible, but real. She exhaled the sound halfway between a laugh and a sob. You have a way of saying things I'm not ready to hear. He looked out at the city lights. Then maybe I'm not here to be heard. Maybe I'm just here to remind you to listen. She studied him for a long moment, the reflection of the skyline flickering in her eyes. Then she said softly, "Thank you for not walking away." He met her gaze, voice low but steady. Some storms aren't meant to be avoided. They're meant to wash something clean. A tear slipped down her cheek before she could stop it. She turned back to the skyline, quickly hiding it in the wind. Behind her, Michael's phone buzzed. He glanced down Lila's message. "Dad, I wrote a letter. I think Mom would like it." He smiled, faintly typing back, "Send it, sweetheart." Then he looked up at Claire, this woman who wore strength like armor and hurt like perfume, and thought, maybe we're both learning how to begin again. The rain had stopped, but inside Atlas Tech thunder still lingered in human form. By the time Claire reached the top floor the next morning, she could already sense the tension through the glass walls. The boardroom lights were on blinds drawn, and voices echoed sharply inside. Emily met her outside the door, face pale. "They called an emergency session," she whispered. "It's about the rumors." Claire adjusted her jacket, the movement calm but calculated. "Then it's time I face the weather I helped create." When she stepped in, a dozen eyes turned toward her. The long table gleamed under the fluorescent light-polished sterile, waiting for blood. Richard Hale was already seated at the head, a thin folder in front of him. "Miss Donovan," he began, tone-clipped and cold. "Please take a seat." She didn't. "If this is about my supposed scandal, let's not waste time pretending it's about policy." A murmur rolled through the room. Hale's lips twitched, disapproving. "You seem confident for someone whose judgment is under question." "I'm confident because I know what this really is," she said evenly. "Fear disguised as governance." He leaned back in his chair, fingers steepled. "Then enlighten us, Claire." "What are we afraid of?" She held his gaze. "That a janitor reminded you what leadership looks like." The room went still. Even the air vents seemed to hold their breath. Hale's jaw tightened. "Your behavior has become unconventional. We've received multiple reports, anonymous ones," she cut in, "because courage is rare in glass buildings." "Enough," he snapped. "This is not a courtroom." "No," she said, stepping forward, "but maybe it should be. Because if this company is going to pass judgment on dignity, then I'll defend it." Her words landed heavy. The younger members of the board shifted in their seats, eyes darting between her and Hale like spectators at a slow-moving storm. Hale opened the folder. "You've allowed a maintenance worker and unvetted employee into executive areas after hours. You've shared confidential meeting spaces, personal time, and according to one report, dinner." Claire exhaled through her nose. "I invited him to dinner. I thanked him for saving a $200 million contract when your translators failed. And if that makes me guilty, then fine. I'm guilty of gratitude." The silence that followed was electric. Hale stood, voice rising. This company was built on professionalism, not pity. Claire took a step closer. "No, Richard. It was built on people. Somewhere along the way you forgot the difference." From the corner of the room came a soft knock. The door opened and Michael appeared, his uniform crisp, his face unreadable. He hadn't been invited, but he had been listening. Mr. Kane Hale said sharply, "This is a private meeting." "Then you should close the blinds better," Michael said quietly. "The whole floor can hear." Gasps flickered through the room. Claire's eyes widened slightly, half warning, half gratitude. Hale sneered. "Since you're here, perhaps you'd like to explain why you think it's appropriate to insert yourself into corporate affairs." Michael stepped forward, slow but deliberate. "Because I was already inserted by circumstance. I didn't ask to be in your boardroom that day. I was there to clean the floor. But when chaos hit, I spoke up, and somehow that became a scandal. Hale crossed his arms. You overstepped your position. Michael nodded. Maybe, but if the right words can stop a storm, does it matter who said them? One of the younger board members, a woman named Karen, spoke softly. You're saying leadership isn't about titles. I'm saying respect isn't, Michael replied. Respect is a language. Either you speak it or you fake it, but it always shows in the translation. Claire's throat tightened. She wanted to speak, but his words carried a calm authority that needed no reinforcement. Hale's voice dripped with disdain. And what do you think you've achieved, Mr. Kane Enlightenment? You're still just the janitor. Michael's eyes didn't flinch. And you're still afraid of being one. The room froze. The sentence hit like lightning. Hale's face darkened, his composure cracking. Claire broke the silence. Enough. This meeting is over. Hale slammed his hand on the table. You don't have that authority. She turned to him, voice like steel wrapped in silk. I have exactly that authority. Because the shareholders didn't hire a puppet, they hired a leader, and leadership means standing where others won't. Karen stood slowly. She's right. Another board member nodded. We've spent years talking about innovation. Maybe it's time we remember empathy as part of it. Hale looked around, realizing the tide was shifting. You're all letting emotion cloud reason. Claire's gaze softened. Emotion is reason, Richard. Without it, we're just machines counting other people's profits. Hale glared at her, his voice lowering. You think this little janitor makes you virtuous? He's a distraction. She smiled faintly. No, he's a mirror. For a long beat, nobody spoke. Then Hale gathered his papers, muttering something under his breath, and stormed out. The door slammed hard enough to make the glass tremble. Michael turned to Claire. You didn't have to defend me. She shook her head. I wasn't defending you. I was defending what you reminded me of. He tilted his head. And what's that? That the cleanest things in life are the ones no one sees. Her words lingered in the air, soft but certain. Karen approached them quietly. Mr. Kane, she said, you may have just changed how we think about ethics training here. Michael smiled. Then maybe today was worth the mess. When the meeting finally dispersed, Claire and Michael stepped into the empty corridor. The tension had lifted, replaced by a quiet peace. You realize, he said lightly, you might have just risked your position. She looked at him, her eyes steady. If a position cost me my humanity, it's not worth holding. He nodded, admiration flickering in his gaze. You're not what I expected from a CEO, she smirked, and you're not what I expected from a janitor. They both laughed softly, tired laughter, but real. As they reached the elevator, Claire's voice grew quiet. Michael, when you spoke in there, you didn't just defend yourself. You taught them something I couldn't. What's that? That integrity sounds better in a whisper than arrogance does in a speech. The elevator doors opened with a soft chime. She stepped in but turned before they closed. You saved us again. He met her eyes. Maybe this time you saved yourself. The doors slid shut between them, leaving both staring at their reflections in the mirrored steel, two people who had finally seen each other clearly. That night, Claire stood alone in her office. She could still hear his words echoing. Respect is a language. For the first time, the silence didn't feel like failure. It felt like understanding. The sun set behind the city like an apology it didn't know how to make. Claire drove, without destination, the city lights smearing into ribbons of gold and white across her windshield. Her phone buzzed with congratulatory messages, investors impressed by her assertive leadership at the board meeting. But she didn't feel victorious. Only hollow. She parked near the waterfront, cut the engine, and let the silence settle. Her reflection stared back from the dark window, strong, successful, and unbearably tired. In that quiet one, thought surfaced like a memory she'd tried to drown. He's right. Silence doesn't mean failure. Her hand moved on its own, typing a message before her mind could stop it. Are you awake? The reply came quickly. Always. Why? She hesitated, then wrote, "Meet me. I need to listen." An hour later, Michael opened his apartment door. He looked surprised, but not startled. The faint smell of coffee and rain lingered inside, along with the soft sound of a piano melody playing from an old speaker, simple, haunting, the kind of tune someone keeps because it hurts too much to delete. "Claire," he said quietly, "you found my address." "I asked Emily," she admitted. "She worries about you, you know." He smiled. "That makes one of you." "I'm sorry for intruding," she said, stepping inside. "But I needed a conversation without walls." He nodded toward the small table where 2 mugs waited. "Then you came to the right place. I don't own walls, just boundaries." She took a seat. The warmth of the mug seeped into her fingers. Around her, the apartment was modest books stacked on crates, photos in mismatched frames, a child's crayon drawing taped near the window. She noticed the handwriting beneath it. Lila, age 9. "She's your daughter," Claire said softly. "She's my reason," he replied. There was a long pause before she spoke again. "You never talk about her. She deserves a life outside my stories," he said, "not trapped in the guilt that built them." Claire looked at him, reading the sorrow behind his calm tone. "Guilt." He exhaled, eyes lowering. "Elena, my wife, was supposed to drive home after a conference. I told her I'd meet her there. She wanted to wait. I said, 'Go ahead, I'll catch up.' She never made it." Claire's breath caught. "The news said it was an accident," he continued quietly. "But I know what caused it. Miscommunication. The one thing I was supposed to be good at." He stared into the steam curling above his coffee. "You spend your life studying languages, and then one mistake steals the only voice that ever mattered." The words hung between them, raw and unguarded. "I left everything after that," he said. "My job, my name, my purpose. I thought if I stopped speaking, I couldn't hurt anyone else." Claire's voice trembled when she finally spoke. "That's not running, Michael. That's mourning." He looked up, the faintest smile breaking the heaviness. "Maybe. But grief doesn't end when the crying stops, it ends when the silence starts sounding like peace." She felt tears rising, surprising her. "You really believe that I have to," he said simply. "Otherwise I'd still be cleaning my own past instead of these floors." They sat in silence for a moment, both listening to the piano piece drifting through the room. The melody swelled, then fell back into its gentle rhythm. "What's that song?" Claire asked. "River Waltz." Elena used to play it when she worked late. She said it helped her forgive the world before sleeping. Claire closed her eyes. "It's beautiful." "It's unfinished," he said. She was writing her own version. For a moment the air between them felt sacred. Then Claire whispered, "Do you ever think forgiveness is overrated?" Michael leaned back, considering. "Forgiveness isn't saying it didn't hurt. It's saying the hurt doesn't own you anymore." She stared at him, voice breaking. "What if you don't deserve it?" He reached across the table, not touching her hand, but close enough for warmth to cross the space. "Then you start by forgiving yourself for thinking you never will." The room went still. The sound of rain returned outside, tapping softly against the window. Claire looked at the crayon drawing again, a stick figure family holding hands beneath a yellow sun. She drew her mother, too. He nodded. "Every time. She says she dreams of her sometimes standing by a river humming this tune." "Does it hurt every day?" he said. "But pain's a kind of language, too. It teaches humility." She took a shaky breath. "You talk about grief like it's a friend." He smiled faintly. "It's a teacher. A hard one, but it never lies." Claire set her mug down, her voice turning almost to a whisper. "My father used to say strength meant never breaking. I spent my life trying not to crack. But tonight I feel like the cracks are the only parts of me that still breathe." Michael looked at her gently. "Then maybe breaking is the bravest thing you've done." She blinked hard, fighting the tears that came anyway. Why do you keep saying things that undo me?" He gave a small shrug. "Because sometimes undoing is the only way to rebuild." The rain intensified, drumming against the glass like a steady heartbeat. "I think I envy you," she said quietly. "Why's that?" "Because you turned pain into peace. I only turned mine into noise." He smiled sadly. "Then let's trade. You teach me how to dream again, and I'll teach you how to listen." She laughed through her tears. "You make it sound easy. It's not, but it's worth it." The piano melody came to an end. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was full like the air right before dawn. Claire stood hesitant. "I should go. The city wakes early even when the heart doesn't." He rose with her, walking her to the door. "Claire," he said softly, "don't let them take this part of you." "What part?" "The one that still believes silence can heal." She nodded, unable to speak. As she stepped into the hallway, she turned back once more. "Michael," she whispered, "do you ever wish you could tell her that you forgive yourself?" He held her gaze, voice breaking just enough to be human. "Every day. And maybe one day she'll hear me." The door closed gently behind her. Outside, Claire walked toward her car. The city lights shimmered off the wet pavement, turning the street into a mirror. She caught her reflection again, but this time she didn't see the CEO. She saw a woman learning to breathe in her own silence. And somewhere behind that reflection, faint and steady, she could still hear the echo of Michael's words. "Grief doesn't end when the crying stops. It ends when the silence starts sounding like peace." She whispered to herself as if answering him across the city. Then maybe tonight peace has finally started to hum. Morning came slow, painted in pale gold through the office glass. The city was just waking, but inside Atlas Tech something felt already changed. The storm had passed, leaving a silence that wasn't empty anymore. It was alive. Michael walked through the hall with his cart, the faint squeak of the wheels syncing with the rhythm of his steps. His badge caught the light now, not as a label but as a quiet badge of belonging. For the first time in years, he didn't feel invisible. When he reached the executive floor, Claire was waiting by the conference room window, a mug of coffee in her hand. She turned when she heard his footsteps. "You're early," she said. "So are you," he replied. She smiled faintly. "Old habits. I spent too many years arriving before everyone else, hoping work would drown the noise." He tilted his head. "And does it still work?" "Not really," she said. "Now I just end up hearing more." He nodded toward her desk. "I heard you postponed the investor summit." She exhaled, almost laughing. "Postponed. Not canceled. They'll survive a little silence." He grinned. "You're learning the language." "I had a good teacher," she said softly. Their eyes met, and for a moment neither looked away. Then Claire cleared her throat. "There's something I want to show you." She gestured toward the far wall. The company's training department had set up a temporary classroom, rows of chairs, a whiteboard, and a digital screen that read, "Workshop Communication, Ethics, and Empathy in Leadership." "You're teaching?" he asked, surprise softening his voice. "I'm attempting to," she said, "but only if you'll help me." He chuckled. "A janitor teaching a CEO how to speak. That's a new kind of promotion." "No," she said. "A human teaching other humans how to listen." He looked around the empty room, imagining it filled with young employees' faces, eager, tired, hopeful. "What exactly do you want me to do?" "Just be yourself," she said, "and remind them what language really is." He took a slow breath. "If you're sure about this, Claire." "I've never been sure of anything." When the employees gathered later that morning, the energy was cautious. Most of them expected a mandatory seminar filled with buzzwords and slides. Instead, they found the CEO and the janitor standing side by side. Claire opened the session. Her voice was calm but grounded. "Today isn't about strategy," she began. "It's about something we've forgotten: connection." Then she turned to Michael. "Mr. Kane, the floor is yours." He stepped forward, no notes, no script, just presence. "I used to think language was about words," he began. But words can lie. What doesn't lie is the way we say them, the pauses, the silences, the weight in our breathing. The room went still. People leaned forward. He picked up a marker and wrote slowly on the board. Respect doesn't need translation. This sentence saved my life, he said quietly. Not because it's clever, but because it's true. I've spoken to people in 6 languages, but the only one that ever healed anyone was this one. Someone in the audience asked, "Respect. How do you teach that?" He smiled. "You don't. You live it loud enough that people start whispering it back." A soft laugh rippled through the crowd. Claire watched from the side, her heart tightening. Every word from him seemed to echo what she'd spent years trying to understand but could never put into speech. Michael continued, "When I first came to this building, I was invisible. People saw the uniform, not the person. But what they didn't realize is that even silence speaks. Every time you walk past someone without acknowledgement, you're teaching a language too, the language of disregard." He paused, letting the words settle. "So if you want to be understood, start by seeing people. Not as roles, not as titles, just as hearts with stories." Claire found herself blinking back tears. "He's not teaching them," she thought. "He's teaching me." After the session, the room erupted in quiet applause, the kind that feels earned, not polite. Several employees came up to shake Michael's hand. A few even apologized for walking past him for months without a word. When everyone finally left, Claire approached him. "You were extraordinary," he smiled. "You mean I didn't embarrass you?" "Michael, she said you've just changed the DNA of this company." He looked at her, voice soft. "Then maybe it's time you stopped calling it a company." She frowned slightly. "What should I call it?" "A community," he said. Her lips curved into a smile. "You really don't know when to stop changing definitions, do you?" "Words are only alive when they evolve," he said. "You of all people should know that." She studied him for a moment. The morning light fell on his face, highlighting the quiet strength there. "You know," she said softly, "you talk about language as if it's sacred." He met her eyes. "It is." That evening, they found themselves walking along the riverbank near the company's new building site. The air was cool, the smell of wet stone mixing with the faint scent of her perfume. "You didn't have to walk me," she said. He smiled. "Maybe I just wanted to see what the world sounds like when you're not in charge." She laughed, really laughed, and it startled both of them. "It sounds peaceful," she said. He nodded. "Peace has a strange way of finding you when you stop chasing perfection." They stopped at the railing, watching the reflection of city lights trembling on the water. The moment hung quietly, weightless. "Michael," she said after a while, "there's something I haven't told you." He turned, listening. "When my father died, I promised myself I'd never let anyone see me weak. I thought strength was silence control success. But now I realize. Maybe real strength is letting someone hear you." He smiled gently. "Then you're stronger than you think." Her voice dropped. "You make it sound like you've been waiting for me to figure that out." "Maybe I have," he said. The silence that followed was soft and full. 2 people breathing the same quiet air, no longer strangers, no longer pretending. Claire looked out at the river, her reflection shimmering next to his. "What language are we speaking now, Michael?" He considered her question carefully. Then with a small smile, he said, "The only one that doesn't need words." For the first time in years, she didn't correct him, didn't analyze, didn't command. She simply closed her eyes and listened to the river, to the city, to the heartbeat she hadn't known was still capable of changing rhythm. And beside her, Michael whispered the same phrase that had carried him through years of silence and sorrow. Respect doesn't need translation. This time, the words didn't sound like a lesson. They sounded like home. A year later, the building no longer felt like glass. It breathed. Atlas Tech had changed so subtly that no one could name the moment it began, only that it started when a janitor and a CEO decided to listen. The company now opened each quarter with a 5-minute silence. No charts, no slides, no sound, just breathing. People called it the pause. Claire called it gratitude, and everyone knew where the idea had come from. Michael stood by the window of the newly opened Human Dignity Center, a small wing attached to the headquarters. Outside, spring had softened the city. The air smelled of rain and magnolia. His daughter, Lila, sat cross-legged on the floor nearby, sorting through colored index cards. "Dad, which one goes first?" she asked. He looked down at her careful handwriting. Each card bore a word, 6 of them in total. Kindness, respect, forgiveness, gratitude, courage, love. "You decide," he said. "You're the one teaching today." She grinned. "You mean helping you teach?" He smiled. "Right. Helping." He still couldn't believe how life had unfolded, a year of rebuilding of forgiveness turning into foundation. Claire had offered him a position as Director of Communications Ethics, but he'd laughed at the title. "Just call me the janitor of hearts," he'd joked. Yet she insisted. "No," she said. "Call it what it is, healing in progress." Now the center was ready for its first class. Employees, interns, and local students were coming to hear about empathy and leadership. But what they didn't know was that today wasn't about a company lesson. It was a goodbye. Claire entered quietly, carrying 2 cups of tea. Her presence still carried grace, but the sharpness that once defined her had softened into something warmer. Still allergic to mornings, she teased. He chuckled. "Only 2 alarms." She handed him a cup. "Well, good news, this place wakes up on kindness, not clocks." He took a sip, savoring the warmth. "You've turned an empire into a sanctuary. Your father would never have believed it." Her smile faltered for a second. "No," she said softly, "but maybe he's listening now." There was a silence between them, the good kind, the kind that hummed with memory. "I read Lila's letter," Claire said after a while. "The one she wrote for the wall." He smiled. "She worked hard on it." "It's beautiful," Claire whispered. "My dad knows 6 languages, but he taught me the 7th one, kindness. It's the only one I'll never forget." Her voice trembled at the last line. "You know, Michael." "She's right." He looked at her gently. About kindness, about never forgetting. He didn't reply. Some truths didn't need answers. At noon, the room filled quickly. Employees, reporters, even city officials packed into the space. Claire stepped up first, welcoming them with steady calm. Today, she began, isn't about achievements or milestones. It's about translation, how one man taught an entire company that humanity doesn't need subtitles. She turned toward Michael. "Mr. Kane, the floor is yours." He stepped forward, not with speeches or slides, just presence. A year ago, he began. "I stood in this building as a man trying to forget his voice. I thought silence was safety. But I learned that silence, when shared, can heal." He paused, glancing toward Lila in the front row. She smiled at him, proud, small hands folded in her lap. "I spent years cleaning what others left behind," he continued. "But one night someone reminded me that the world doesn't need perfection, it needs care. And that care," he gestured toward Claire, "can change everything." The crowd's attention shifted to her. Claire's eyes shimmered. "I once thought power was about noise," she said softly, "about being the loudest in every room. But real power." She looked at him, as in listening. The room fell quiet. Even the air seemed to stand still. Michael took a slow breath. "If I could teach one thing," he said, "it would be this language isn't made of words, it's made of choices. The choice to be patient, to forgive, to say nothing when silence speaks louder, to love even when it hurts." He wrote on the board one final time, "Respect doesn't need translation." And then he added beneath it in small, careful letters, "But love makes the world understand." Applause filled the room, not the loud kind that ends quickly, but the slow-rising one that builds from the heart. People stood not because they were told to, but because something inside them did. Claire joined him at the front. "Michael," she said quietly, "I heard you're leaving the city." He nodded. "Lila wants trees instead of traffic." "I think she's right. And you?" He smiled. "I just want peace to sound like home for once." She took a breath, steadying herself. "Then promise me one thing." "What's that?" "Don't stop teaching. Even if it's just her, even if it's just you." He nodded slowly. "I promise." She looked at him, then really looked. The man who had once been invisible now stood radiant in his humility, a living lesson carved from loss and love. When the ceremony ended, people lingered, shaking hands, whispering gratitude. Claire stayed back watching as Michael packed his notes. "Do you ever regret meeting me?" she asked softly. He turned to her, smiling with that quiet, patient warmth. "How can I regret the person who gave my silence meaning?" She blinked back a tear. "I don't know what this place will sound like without you." He reached out, touching her hand briefly. "Then listen closely. It'll sound exactly like it should alive." For a heartbeat they stood there, the world outside fading into something smaller, softer. Then Layla ran up, clutching her notebook. "Dad," she said breathlessly, "they want us to sign the wall before we go." He knelt beside her. "What should we write?" Lila grinned. "The same thing you always say." Together they wrote, "Respect doesn't need translation." But Lila added one more line beneath it in her uneven handwriting, "Neither does love." Claire watched them, her heart full and aching. When they were done, Michael turned back to her. "Take care of this place," he said. "I will," she promised. "And if I forget," he smiled. "Just listen. The walls remember." That evening, as the sun melted into the horizon, Claire walked alone through the now quiet halls. Her heels made soft echoes against the marble floor. Somewhere faintly she thought she heard laughter, the sound of a child, the whisper of a janitor humming a song that once mended a broken room. She stopped by the wall where the words were written, tracing them gently with her fingertips. Outside, the city lights began to bloom, and in that glow she finally understood he hadn't just fixed a company. He'd repaired the part of the world that still believed in kindness. Claire closed her eyes, took one long, grateful breath, and whispered, "Thank you, Michael, for teaching me the only language that never fades." The hum of the building answered softly, as if in prayer. And somewhere beyond the glass, in a small house where the river met the trees, a man and his daughter watched the sunset in perfect silence, the kind that didn't need words. And that was the language that healed. A story about how one man's silence taught an entire world to listen, and how a woman who once led with power learned to lead with heart. Sometimes the people we overlook are the ones holding the lessons we need most. Because true strength isn't found in control or status. It's found in empathy, in the courage to forgive, and in the quiet human act of listening even when it hurts. If you've ever met someone who changed your life with a simple act of kindness, or if you've lived a story like this yourself, I'd love to hear it. Share your experience in the comments below. Where are you watching from tonight? What moment reminded you that respect and compassion never need translation? If this story touched you even just a little, please take a moment to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell, so you never miss the next story that speaks straight to the heart. Thank you for watching, for feeling, and for being part of this growing community where every story reminds us that love, humility, and understanding are still the most powerful languages on earth. Until next time, keep listening, keep believing, and keep choosing kindness.